me?
Please type yes
Lori,
in the chat box if you can hear Chris.
If you can't locate the chat box, if you look at the upper right-hand side of your screen, there's a speech bubble. Click on that. Awesome. All right, so welcome to Literature in the Gifted Classroom. My name is Christopher Vian. I'm the president-elect of the New Mexico Association for the Gifted. And tonight we're going to be discussing not just what we consider canonically literature, but various different modes of reading and literacies and how we can best use those with our gifted students. So a little bit about myself. I was identified as a gifted student in middle school in Oklahoma. I have a bachelor's degree in communication, a master's degree in English, and in secondary education with an emphasis on gifted. I have taught for 6 years, and I've taught all age groups, from elementary, middle, high school, and I was an adjunct professor for a while. Currently, I teach 6th and 7th grade gifted, middle school humanities, and 6th grade advanced English language arts at Chief Manuelito Middle School in Gallup-McKinley County. So one of the things that I think is really important as we discuss literature this evening is to think about the ways in which literature has impacted us. So if you look at your screen, you will see covers for 3 novels. Each one of these novels has been an integral part of my journey as a reader and as a person. So one of the first aspects of interactivity I'd like us to deal with is I would like you to think of a book that has greatly impacted your life, and if you would please add that into chat. I'll give you about 2 minutes to do this. So one of the things that is most important to me when it comes to webinars and professional developments is that there's a marriage between theory and practice. So tonight we're going to talk about the theory of reading, but we're also going to look at some of the things that I found successful in my own classrooms. But before we do that, we need to work from some definitions. So, according to the dictionary, the Oxford English Dictionary, literature is defined as written works, especially those considered of superior or lasting artistic merit. This is what we traditionally consider literature. However, for me, I did to take a more holistic look at literature. So, as you can see on the slide here, all books, literature, stories have value. This can be novels, short stories, poetry, drama, manga, audiobooks, podcasts. Right? Anything that helps our students engage with storytelling, whether fiction or nonfiction, I think is equally valid in this discussion. So now we're going to move on to the theory portion, which I know is everybody's favorite portion, but I promise it is not going to be painful. So first we want to look at the traits of gifted and talented readers. So I pulled this information from an article written by Reese in 2003. And when I send out the PowerPoint presentation after the webinar this evening, you can see where Reese's name is in a different font color. Those are direct links to the articles I'm citing. So Reese discusses that several of the traits of talented and gifted readers are things that we would usually expect. Readers who eagerly engage in reading-related activities. So not just the reading aspects, but also the discussion or discursive aspects of literature. They are engaged and often seek to apply previous knowledge to new reading experiences. One of the things that Reese really focuses on is that gifted and talented readers focus on reading for extended periods of time. These are those kids who, take the flashlight to bed and read under the covers after they're supposed to go to sleep. So another thing that they do is they seek out advanced materials. Now, this does not mean they read advanced materials all the time, but they are interested in books that some might not consider age appropriate due to the content. Finally, when they reach a challenging portion of the reading, they demonstrate tenacity. In other words, they keep going until they get it. So these are the students who will come to you with 400 questions about a book. Why this? Why? Or what does this mean? And finally, this is where we see our students, particularly our elementary students, become obsessed with particular topics. I had a second grade student who loved dinosaurs and could pronounce the scientific names of dinosaurs despite being a second grader. The books he read, both fiction and nonfiction, were geared towards dinosaurs. So Reese talks about how the interest of our students outside of the gifted arena and the reading arena really show up in what novel selections they make. So next we want to focus on the issue of basic word skills and gifted readers. So this is really an issue in elementary schools because one of the things that elementary schools are geared towards is teaching those basic word skills. So simple sentences, basic definitions, sounding out words. One of the things that we have to do is move beyond those simple skills. We want to make sure that our students are being engaged with their reading. So we can't have a student who is gifted sitting in circle time going, for apple, right? We need to have these students engaged at their level. Next, we need to make sure that the books that we are giving them and the assignments we're giving them require both critical and creative reading. Essentially what this means is they must pose some sort of challenge and they must cause the reader to think in a meaningful way. If this doesn't happen, our readers become bored and simply will tune out and quit paying attention. Next, we need to provide flexible assignments and remove unnecessary repetition. We all know that gifted student who gets so bored after they have shown their knowledge once. So what Lavonde suggests is that we need to ensure that in the gifted classroom and in the English language arts classroom that we have differentiated instruction for these students and that we are prepared as soon as that student shows their knowledge for them to move on to a harder and more complex activity. And then finally, as all of us know, we must nurture our divergent and diversified interests. Our students essentially need to be allowed to read books, stories, novels on topics that interest them. By doing this, we can help create a love of reading within these students as well as a passion for their particular subjects of interest. Lavonde suggests that if we don't do this, we can actually diminish the desire of our gifted students to read. So one of the things that this article really does well is it sums up the complications in primary education when it comes to our gifted readers. It is often difficult for teachers to figure out the correct differentiation strategies in their classrooms, particularly if we're in a classroom that has reading skills from non-readers all the way up to 6th or 7th grade. So what that tells us is that as gifted teachers and instructors, one of the things that we need to do is become a resource for our English language arts teachers to give them ways to encourage our readers to read works that are on their level. Next, we have text selection and comprehension. So this might seem a little bit contradictory to what I previously said, but gifted readers should be given a choice in what they read, but they should not have complete choice. Essentially, we don't want our gifted readers to just be reading the same book over and over again, or the same genre over and over again. Instead, we want to give them controlled options. An example of this would be, I currently have a student in 7th grade, where he gets to pick out a book. Once he's finished with that, I pick out a book for him. And so far, we have gone back and forth with fiction and nonfiction as he's expanded the genres which he's reading. So one of the important things that Wood talks to us about is that our gifted readers will often hyper-focus on genres or topics to the detriment of exposure to anything else. Therefore, as instructors, we must have a guiding hand. Next, there's this misconception that just because a student is a gifted reader, that they have correct reading comprehension skills. While advanced reading comprehension is a necessary part of being a gifted reader, we still have to directly instruct our students on how to comprehend what they're reading. This might be comprehending basic parts of the plot, the 5 W's, who, what, when, where, why. Or it could be analyzing and comprehending more complex facets of reading, such as symbolism, allusion, characterization. But one of the things that we cannot forget is that our gifted students, despite being gifted, still need direct instruction. By giving them direct instruction, we can help provide context to what they're reading and help give them a more complete understanding of what's going on in their reading. And then finally, and I think we can all agree with this, the discussion of text is paramount to understanding. One of the most beneficial things that we can do while reading is have somebody read along with us and then discuss the text. So as teachers, and I know this is a little bit difficult, we at least need to have a passing knowledge of the books that our students are reading. In my classroom library, I will admit I have not read every book that I own. I have, however, read their synopses, whether on Wikipedia or gone to Goodreads to kind of get a general sense of what the novel or story is about. By having this generalized knowledge, I can prompt my students in discussion to delve deeper into various topics and subjects within the stories that they are reading. It is not possible to expect any teacher to read everything. However, by having this general knowledge of what our students are reading, we can more effectively engage with our students' understanding of texts. One of the things that is most important about this would suggest is that reading is not a solitary activity. Instead, reading should be viewed as a social activity. And one of the ways to increase reading outcomes for our gifted students is by encouraging them to engage in reading as a social activity. Now, this does not mean that our gifted students have to lead group discussions. No, this could simply mean a one-on-one conversation with your student. And I think one of the things that we can see through looking at these various aspects of theory is that this applies not just to our primary grade readers, but also applies to our middle and high school level readers as well. It's just a level of depth and complexity that separates an advanced elementary school reader from an advanced high school reader. The theories on how to engage with those children are essentially the same. So, next we have this concept of new literacies, and this comes from Hebert and Pagnini. So, one of the things that we know is that it is incredibly difficult for boys to become interested in reading. And Hebert and Pagnini's article focuses heavily on increasing readership among gifted boys. However, I think the concept of new literacies is applicable to all of our students. So one of the first things that is mentioned in this article is that conceptions about what books are worthy to read often ignore our students' interest. So we should not be telling our students that a book is not worthy to read. Instead, we should be framing it within a context that allows the student to read while at the same time engaging in advanced activities. So there's a quote that I found really compelling in this article. It was from a 6th grader. He said, "My teacher doesn't think that these are real books." He was speaking about graphic novels. And I think it's important to note that graphic novels are serious literature in the traditional sense of the word. So one of the things that we most definitely want to ensure is that none of our students feel that their reading choices are bad. The moment students begin feeling that reading choices are bad is the moment we start killing love of reading. So one of the most effective things that I have found within my own classroom is being open to genre fiction, being open to books outside of the traditional canon, and to be open to different ways of reading. So one of the topics that I discussed earlier in what I consider literature were podcasts and audiobooks. Now, this might seem to contradict the idea that we are focused on reading with gifted readers. However, part of reading is the text comprehension portion, and we know that students comprehend better when they are engaged in multiple sense activities. One of the things that I would argue and advocate for is that by combining podcasts or audiobooks with texts, with written text, we can actually encourage our students to more effectively engage with the text. Furthermore, for some of our gifted students, it might be easier for them to pick up on subtleties and characteristics if they can hear the audio versus if they're just reading from the page. I would suggest that try it out, at very least within your classrooms, and see how different the level of comprehension is between simply reading from a page versus reading and following along with audio. All right, so we are out of the theory section. Are there any questions so far? Or are there any comments? All right, so as we move into the classroom strategy section, these are going to be geared from my personal experience in the classroom. So one of the things that I have found particularly successful and beneficial is the use of literature circles. So the simple way that this works within our room is that I have a selection of 5 or 6 different books, and I allow my students to group up. So last year I ran literature circles with Speak by Laurie Hall Sanderson, 1984 by George Orwell, The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian by Sherman Alexie, and Lord of the Flies by William Golding. The students were allowed to pick the novels based on their own interest. Each student had a specific role within the group, and those roles shifted week by week as we were reading. One of the things that was amazing about this was that the depth of discussion was actually greater than a whole class novel. Essentially, the smaller groups allowed for my gifted students who were more quiet, more introverted, to display their knowledge in an arena they felt safe in, particularly because I had several groups of friends choose the same novel. So I find literature circles to be an amazing way to increase engagement with text and to really dive deep into their contents. And then we also give the students choice. So while I picked the novels that were options, the students themselves were able to select which novel they actually read. And one of the things that I have found particularly effective with literature circles is to engage in the use of assessment menus. Essentially, I let the students pick how they're going to be assessed. One of the key requirements is that there's always a writing portion. However, there's also an artistic portion, a creative portion, an analytical portion. The students show their knowledge in various different ways. Next up, we have soundtrack the story. And this is actually my favorite assignment that my students do. So you take a text, a story, whatever, and you allow the kids to create a playlist of songs selected by them of any genre. You can work this playlist around plot, theme, characterization, symbolism, any of the aspects of reading comprehension. Then the students explain why they selected those songs. This allows them to draw intertextual connections between stories and music, and it also allows them to increase their ability to create allusions within their own work. This also encourages students to conceptualize reading in different ways. Oftentimes, students forget that song lyrics are simply poetry. And by asking them to engage with both poetry and prose at the same time, you're drawing connections between different categories of reading. And finally, I wish I could claim that these are my own work. Instead, one of my associates who teaches at McKinley Academy here in Gallup McKinley County Schools, Brian Biswell, does some really fascinating things with vocabulary and one-pagers. Essentially, with these one-pagers, the students can either write an advertisement using vocabulary words. If you look at the middle picture, you can see them underlined. As you can tell, these are definitely gifted students because we have spelling errors because they are moving too quickly. If you look at the far right of your screen, Mr. Biswell gives them the opportunity to draw images which relate directly to the word that they're being asked to define. So instead of demanding that students verbally define words, Mr. Biswell allows his students to visually, artistically define these words. I think that this is really important because we know we have artistically creative and gifted students who might not necessarily be gifted readers. However, they're able to take information from words and create images which more accurately depict their knowledge. I think by doing this, we can most effectively allow our students to show knowledge in meaningful ways. All right, so one of the articles which I spoke of earlier gave this bibliography of different strategies. Now, I don't expect all teachers to run out and read this. However, I think it's important for us to look at what some of the research says, particularly in regards to acceleration and appropriate use of technology, as that's becoming more and more important in our state. One of the things that I also found particularly helpful was the Renzulli and Rice 1989 and Rice et al. 2005 about independent reading choices. This really delves into the idea that while it is important to give our students some choice, we must also have a guiding hand in that choice, because otherwise we might have students simply engaging with the same text or the same genre repeatedly. So I think that it would be worth your time if you are looking for particular aspects of strategies within your classroom to take a look at some of these resources. All right, so next we have, and I think this is the most important part, how literature is used by students. So I've gleaned this from the articles previously mentioned, from my own students in my own classroom, and from my own experience. So if you see anything that you would like to add during this session, or during this section, please add it in chat. So one of the #1 ways that books are used is books as fun. We have students who read for enjoyment. And one of the things we have to remember is that not every book needs to be challenging or canonical. Sometimes it is okay for our students to read what they're comfortable with. The reason why I put Diary of a Wimpy Kid on here as the image is because my 6th and 7th graders continually ask to go back and reread these novels. One of the reasons why is because it's a comfort. The reading we do in my gifted class and in my English language arts class is extremely high level. For instance, my 7th grade gifted students just finished doing a unit on romanticism and transcendentalism. That is some high level reading they're doing. And sometimes they need a break, just like we need a break. Allow for genres that you yourself might not enjoy. To be honest, I don't enjoy Diary of a Wimpy Kid. I never really have. However, because my students find value in it, that in and of itself is valuable to us. At the end of the day, our goal with reading is to instill a love of reading. We know from research that the vast majority of Americans do not read a book after they graduate from high school. And one of the reasons I feel that this is because we do not respect and honor the choices that our young readers make. So I would encourage all of you to continue to challenge your students, but also give them that time to relax and rest in a comfort area after you've engaged in a truly challenging behavior. Next, we have books as an exploration of self. So gifted students will often use novels and nonfiction to figure out things about themselves. We should be offering suggestions for books that allow this exploration. So Your Rainforest Mind by Paula Prober is my absolute favorite book when it comes to dealing with the social emotional needs of gifted students and allowing gifted students to reflect on who they are. This book covers kind of all of the major facets of social emotional needs. And one of the great things about it, it is written at a level that can be used in middle school and high school as is, or can be modified to work with your higher elementary students. If it is possible, work through these books with your students or children. One of the things we want to do is we want to be available for them to bounce ideas off of us. However, one of the best things that we can model for our students is saying, I don't know, let's find out. So as your students are working through using books as an exploration of self, if you don't have the answer, say so. Encouraging our students to understand that not everybody knows everything is a key and important aspect of our work. We want to build them up so that they know if they do not know the answer, they can find the answer. And then finally, we have books for empathy. We know our students are interested in the world outside of themselves, and a lot of our gifted students fight for causes that they believe in. So one of the things that we can do is we can help connect our students with novels or nonfiction that discuss larger issues that our students understand and are interested in exploring. So students will use these novels to dive into subject matter that is of interest to them and directly impacts their friends and family. This book here, An Indigenous People's History of the United States for Young People, I recommended to a 7th grade student that I currently have, and that has led to him conducting more and more research about the Navajo Nation and the ways that the Navajo Nation has dealt with various different issues regarding colonization and mistreatment. So our students are looking for books that give them more information and more ways to be empathetic towards one another. I know it can often seem like our students are just wanting to be rude and mean to each other. However, that defense mechanism can be lowered by giving them examples of books that encourage and increase empathy. And then finally, we have everybody's favorite, books for school. So we all know that students read for school, but there's no reason why that should be any less enjoyable than reading for any other purpose. One of the most successful units I ever taught was in Oklahoma in a 6th grade classroom teaching Something Wicked This Way Comes. My students were deeply engaged with this material because they found it interesting. So I think we have to be very intentional with how we pick our stories and how we pick our novels that we're reading. One of the things that we have to balance is we have to balance complexity and difficulty with the ability of our students to enjoy what they are doing. We have the zone of proximal development, where it's just that little bit of extra struggle where learning happens. However, if there is no enjoyment, very little learning actually happens as our students begin to fight back against what they consider either unfairness or being bored. So one of the things we must consider when we look at books for school is how we are creating a system that encourages both complexity and enjoyment of novels. So that is the last bit of the section for usage of books. So are there any questions or comments that you guys would like to discuss real quick before we move on?
And I'm going to just unmute for a minute to just ask if everybody knows where the chat box is so that they can ask questions. Whoops. It's not working. Hold on a second. Are you all able to find the chat box? Okay, well, if there are no other questions, we will move on.
All right. So forgive me for that. So as we are wrapping up this evening, our goal was to keep this at about 30 minutes so that it was a good use of your time, but also that we could delve a little bit deeply into this content. So first off, I would like to thank you for joining us for our inaugural webinar for the New Mexico Association for the Gifted. And I would like to thank you for taking your evening to listen to us. Now, we are having our 15th annual conference in October on the 16th and 17th. Our conference theme this year is Lighting the Way to Equity and Excellence, a Call to Action. So we will be holding this in Santa Fe at the American Indian Art Institute. And we are really excited by our keynote speakers. Jeffrey Moon, past president of the New Mexico Association for the Gifted and current coordinator for the Santa Fe School District, will be one of our keynote speakers. And if you've heard Jeffrey speak, you know how passionate and amazing he is. Our speaker from out of state is a member at large of the NAGC board, Sheila Gallagher. Dr. Sheila Gallagher is a fantastic advocate for our gifted students, and she was very heavily involved with the Duke TITS, right, the Duke Talent Search. So we are super excited to engage with advocacy and passion for our gifted students this October. Please pay attention to your emails for both information about the conference hotel, but more importantly, our call for papers. We really want to engage with the teachers, district coordinators, librarians here in the state of New Mexico and hear specifically what they have to say about topics in gifted education. So please save the date. And if you have any questions about our conference, please feel free to contact us at my personal email, cvian87@gmail.com, or you can contact us at nmgifted@gmail.com. Also, please consider following us on Twitter at nmgifted, or you can search for us on Facebook at the New Mexico Association for the Gifted. I would like to take this opportunity to again thank you, and I would like, if you have any comments or questions as we wrap up, I'd be more than happy to answer them for you.